So this tutorial is the custom subview application part 1. It's a multiple part tutorial, so just keep in mind you want to save your work at the end of this one so we can use it next time. Unless you have to go back to, well, some people are customizing it, they're not making it like the generic solution. So we often want to create subviews for the main view dynamically. So this one's going to do it not by dragging and dropping and sticking stuff over, we're going to do it programmatically or dynamically throughout the source code. Why do I want to do that? Because maybe we want to create a view when we click on one of our, maybe I'll do this actually, when we click on one of our items from the friends list, open up a view and then have a form in there to fill out the text message, because you have to have, or just maybe just send it automatically to the mail, who knows. I'll think of something creative to combine with this, turn it into another learning exercise. But so in this tutorial we're going to explore the best practices for doing this and how to avoid some of the difficulties in tracing errors along the way. So we're going to use the NS log to kind of figure out which view is which one kind of thing and see what's going on. So we're going to start in by creating a new Xcode project, and we're going to use a single view application, and we're going to call this a subview test. You can call it subview if you want. Don't use the storyboard and use automatic reference counting. So I'm going to go in here and I'm going to create a new project, single view application. I'm going to call this one sub. And we're going to call it my subs. My subs. There we go. That way I can tell this one from the downloaded solution that I might actually have opened up already, so I don't get confused with which one is which. So, alright, so I have my application created. That part should have been a no-brainer at this point. So I'm going to go through in here and I'm going to say, well, what am I going to do? Next we're going to create two UI view instances and add them to the ViewController's view as a subview. So to create the two new UI view classes, these are classes by the way, we're going to select File, New, File from the menu. From the Objective-C templates, we're going to pick out Objective-C from the Coca Touch menu. I'm going to go through this in a second. Make sure that they're both subclasses of UI view. Name them View 1 and View 2. This reminds me of, what is that, Thing 1 and Thing 2? Cat in a Hat? No, okay, I'm the only one who finds humor in this. Okay. The Cat in a Hat, Thing 1, Thing 2. I guess, okay, go out and rent Cat in a Hat. Alright, well, if you have kids, go out and rent Cat in a Hat. Okay, new file, Thing 1 and Thing 2. Coca Touch. Objective-C class. Next, we want UI view. So if I just pressed in U actually, and I got UI view. This one's going to be View 1, and I'm going to do the same thing over again in a few minutes. I'm going to be creating View 2. It doesn't matter where you stick it over here. I clicked on the project folder, the main project folder over here. I have a strange feeling it's going to go under supported files. It might go in the middle. It doesn't matter where it goes. So this one's going to be View 1, if I spell it correctly. There we go. It doesn't really matter what I call it actually. It's going to matter when I call it from the code, and I have to remember what I called it, so I'm going to call it View 1. Create. Here it is up here. So I got View 1. And now I'm going to do the same thing again up here. I'm going to click back up here on the project. Put them both in the same spot. File, New, File. And this one's going to be called View 2, so I'm clicking on Objective-C class, Coca Touch. Next, View 2. No, there is no XIB for this, by the way. It's a view that we're going to load in an existing XIB that we have, using an existing view controller that we have. So now I have two views. Not done anything with them yet, but I'm going to load them programmatically inside of my XIB actually. So let's take a look here. Excuse me. My voice is bad from the weekend. Okay, so next. Again, we're going to use the File New, and we're going to create a protocol, because we're going to include the protocol. So what is a protocol, as we mentioned before? It's similar to an interface. It creates a class that we're going to use that's going to have a bunch of methods in it, templates, interfaces that we're going to essentially implement inside of our view. If our views both abide by the same protocol, then they have the same methods in them, we can treat them the same way, they're interchangeably, and we can use them as a generic view no matter how many views we have. Do we really need to do it for 2 views? Probably not. Probably, but if we had a dozen views and we were going to try them to make them all kind of abide by the same rules and have the same methods and the same implementation, then we definitely would want to not want to implement that. Yes?
It can only have methods and protocols, or it can have.
You can have data as well. Yeah.
Is it
You
the
can keep
same
track.
as authentication?
Excuse me?
It's same as the authentication, or it's different?
No. Let's we'll come through and I'll show you what this is doing. For those of you who are asking these questions, we covered protocols in the beginning part of this course, around week 2 or 3. And if there's a protocol exercise that we went through that you can go find on it's actually in the examples directory. And we went through a tutorial that created and used a protocol. So go back and take a look at that, and you'll be able to get up to speed on the concept of that. So again, we're going to use a file, new file, select the Objective-C protocol template, and create a new protocol named ViewDelegate. So we're calling it a ViewDelegate because it's going to be and going back to the concept of the delegate, we have an app delegate that controls the app. Think of the delegate like the traffic guard. It's going in, it's directing traffic. App delegate knows which view to load up first, which view controller to use first, which subclass of that is going on. So we're creating a view delegate that's going to give commands and control activities of our views that we have. So here we're selecting Coca Touch, and we're going to go Objective-C protocol, just like we've done before for other protocols we have done in the past here. So file, new, and I'm going to put it up here actually. So it's the option over here, Objective-C protocol. Make sure you're in the Coca Touch category. Next, what are we going to call this thing? View delegate or something? View delegate. Maybe. Did I capitalize it? Let's see. View delegate looks good. We're going to have a view delegate.h file. Remember, protocols are just interfaces. They only have one file that's associated with them. And I'm going to let it right here. So when we make these views here, and when we make them use the protocol, we need to implement whatever it is we put in here. Why don't we stick this inside of the view.h and view1.h and view2.h? Well, because we want to make them consistent. So the use of the protocol is going to make sure that our behavior is pretty consistent between all the different views. All right. So open up viewDelegate.h and add the following 2 method prototypes to it. Remember, there's no implementation in this, it's just a method prototype. And one of them is going to be button 1 pressed and the other one's going to be button 2 pressed, because that's really all these 2 views are doing. You just have 2 buttons on them. So I inside my protocol, and you can tell it's a protocol because it says @protocol. And I'm pasting this in. And I'm going to fix my paste errors. Now I have 2 method prototypes that I'm going to need to implement. Right now, I don't have a problem. I don't have to implement them at all because I haven't really used the protocol. So I'm going to need to tell View 1 and View 2 that they need to use this protocol. We just did this earlier today in the Objective-C class with 2 other protocols, and we strung them together by commas. Here we only have one. This is actually kind of easier. So let's see what I believe I'm guessing what's going to come up next, but we'll see. It is. Well, no, actually we're going to add properties, which is going to be interesting. I'm going to do this a slightly different way. So we're going to open up view1.h and view2.h, and then we're going to add the header file to use the viewDelegate.h protocol. Both files have the same code added to them. And I didn't put it in here, did I? Is it? Where do you see the import view? Oh, yes, okay. Okay. We can do it this way, yeah. So let's adding the imports. We also need to do something else to make it work too, but let's do it this way. So add the import file to View 1 and to View 2. There's View 2, View 1. They're both going to look the same way. Because we're going to use this protocol, we have to include the .h file for the view delegate. to use it. Rather than, I don't believe we're going to add it to the interface line though, which is kind of interesting, unless I have it further down the road. Let me just take a look here real quick. No, I didn't do it that way. Okay. Interesting. We're going to do it that way eventually. In the ViewController. Alright, let's just follow along. Not assume anything. We'll just follow around step by step. This is an interesting implementation actually. We're going to add two properties as follows. Both views will have a delegate object that will respond to messages in ViewDelegate.h. So we're going to add these two properties. We have a UI button and we have an ID for the ViewDelegate that's following the protocol for ViewDelegate. So cut and paste and put this code inside of each one of View 1 and View 2 as well. They're both going to look the same. They're basically doing the same thing. So put it inside of the .h here. So let's see. Actually, my cutting and pasting is working remarkably well today. I shouldn't complain. Alright, so now I have the two properties, which means I'm going to have to add some synthesizing. So what am I doing here? I'm creating a UI button programmatically. I'm not going to actually drag and drop and put a button on any view because I'm creating the views programmatically. The view that I'm creating, which I'm going to extend from UI, which I'm inheriting from UI view. This is a view object. It's called View 2. It contains a button called button, a UI button called button. It also contains an ID that's associated with the view delegate. It's a view delegate. It's going to be a piece of data that's going to keep track of which view I'm actually looking at. It's going to implement those methods as well, and we're going to see how that works together in a few minutes. But I'm going to go ahead and cut and paste this blindly, stick it in the other one. Did I do that already? This is the second one, so I'm going to make sure I have both of them implemented. I do. Make them match, I guess. So we're going to switch over now. We're going to edit the .m files that are associated with this, so both views will have the delegate object that will respond to the message. You can put the synthesize all in one line, or you can put it on two separate ones as this is listed here. So edit View 1 and View 2 to synthesize the button and the delegate. This is old stuff we've done many times, so you should be familiar with this. Right underneath at implementation, go ahead and add the synthesize line. So now we have the setters and the getters for the two pieces of the two properties that we've defined, the button and the delegate. Let's see, view1.delegate. Here, let me add it in here too. Oops, .m file. Put it in the .m file. We haven't looked at the code inside of the .m yet, and we're going to do that shortly. But it's very simple. We just have an init with frame. The view gets initialized with a frame, and the frame's going to be of some, rectangular thing that we're going to stick inside of something. We're just going to stick. The ViewController is going to do it. So. We're not actually implementing, we're going to put it in the ViewController. So in view1.m, make the following chain. Remove the existing initWithFrame method and replace it with these two methods. Because we're going to initialize now with a frame. This is the same method, prototype, I believe. Let's just make a comparison here. So I'm going to go into view1, did it say? View1.m. The current view1.m has this skimpy little method in it that goes up and calls the super initWithFrame. It's just an initWithFrame, doesn't do anything. So we want to add some functionality to it. So I'm going to get rid of the initWithFrame that's here, and I'm going to replace it with the one here that has some functionality that we're looking for. What is the functionality that we're looking for? Well, we're still going to call the super frame, and we're still going to start that one. But we're going to set the button here. We're going to set the self button as a UI button, button with type button, type round rectangular button. So we're going to put the button in the frame, and then we're going to, in the component that we're creating, we're going to put the button in there, and then we're going to set the button, the CG rectangular button format to a certain size. We can change the size of the button if you want. We're going to set the button frame to the button frame. Which is going to be our button frame that was defined, that's going to be defined to hold the button contents. And we're going to set the title, so self.button set title to 1. And then for the state, it's going to be UI control state normal, which means it's not selected or anything. What are we doing here? We're looking at properties of a button. If you go into the attribute inspector and you look at some of those properties, you can set .title, .selected, all these different things that you can set for the button. The action is going to be for button touched. So we're going to create a UI action here for button touched. For control events, it's going to use the touch up inside. So this is a programmatic way of creating a button, putting it on the view that we're going to load inside of the frame. That's going to basically have the same properties that would exist if we dragged and dropped the button and stuck it on the view. Because it's essentially going to be added to the subview. So it's going to use the touch up inside. We can change the methods around if we wanted to do the touch down. It's the same properties that we're working at with a normal UI round rectangular button. So return self. Pretty good here. So what do we got here? We have the event, the button touched event, and here's our void button touched method. And it's going to send a message. It's going to be self.delegate. Send the message view1 button pressed. Because we're going to let the delegate handle the activity of what happens. So we have one delegate that's controlling, that's really set for the two views, and we have the two views are going to have the same things on it. The code for the view 2 is going to look exactly like this. So I'm going to go ahead and the pieces will come together when we start looking at the delegate behavior. So it may or may not come together, we'll see. Let's see, copy this one here, and this one is supposed to be for button 1, excuse me, for view1.m. So I'm going to go back into view1.m, and I removed the method here, so I'm going to paste it back in. This, believe it or not, is the initializer method, the only method that we have in the button, and actually the cut and paste worked. So I'm going to keep that in my memory actually and just change the button to 2 because I think that's all the difference is going to be. We'll see. So we overridden the view1's initWithFrame method in order to dynamically place a UI button on the view. And then we're going to set the title of the button to 1. And then we're going to add the action method to the button touch up inside before adding the button to the subview. Then we're going to add the button to the subview. And the button touch action just calls the delegate method that we're going to create. Actually, it's going to call the same delegate method. Well, no, it's going to call the delegate method that's implemented from the protocol for the view. So make the following changes, remove the init, this is the one for the second button. It's the same thing as the first button. So I guess I could just keep it whatever I have in the memory. It's going to be the same, but let me just make sure I'm testing the code actually here too. So let's put this one in the view2.m. Remove that method and paste this one in. It's the view2, so the only difference really should be that the word 2 is here for the button title instead of 1. It's doing the same thing and has the same method associated with it. Actually, it says view2 button pressed. So it's probably a good thing I did I did cut and paste. I did actually put the right button code in here. So now we have view2 button pressed, view1 button pressed. The message is being sent to self-delegates. Okay, good. So let's see, delegate is this guy here we've synthesized. So, self-delegate. It's a delegate prototype. So view 2 is now very similar to view 1. So now we have the two views. We have to add them to the view controller. So we take the two subviews, we're going to put them into the view controller so that the view controller is controlling both of them. So we have to import the two header files that we're going to use. So this is import view 1 and view 2, so I'm going to do that first here actually. So I'm copying import view 1 and view 2. I'm going to put it into ViewController.h. So ViewController.h way over here. Underneath the import for UI kit, which is going to give us our GUI component, I'm going to put this in here. And of course my word wrapping didn't work. And of course, I'm in the view controller. Okay, there we go. after a few catches up here. Okay, there we go. Now we're going to change the line of the @ interface to use the delegate, excuse me, use the protocol that we created. We created a view delegate, and so I'm not going to take this whole line, I'm just going to take this last little piece here. So this is what we've been doing with protocols. In order to use the protocol, we're extending this. So we're going to use the protocol in ViewController.h in terms of our implementation of ViewController.m, which is going to require that we implement those methods that we put the prototypes for in ViewDelegate.h, which is our protocol. So we tell ViewController that we want to use the protocol because this is where we're implementing the methods. So we didn't have to tell View1 and View2 about this, although we have an ID of the delegate type that we're going to send to this one because we need to know what button was pressed. So we're going to send the self button 1 pressed, button 2 pressed. So self delegate got sent the button that was pressed from the view, so we can identify which button so that the view controller can handle the button press. Why don't we just stick this all on one canvas or stick this all on one view? Because then we wouldn't be able to see how we can take it out and put it into subviews. This tutorial is about subviews. So for something this small, I know it's kind of senseless, but there's a big learning objective to this. Right, so I'm in ViewController.h, and no, I'm in yes, I am in ViewController.h. I'm adding it to the end of my @ interface. So now ViewController is inherited from UI ViewController, and it's implementing the ViewDelegate protocol. So now I'm ready, and if I go over to the ViewController.m, instantly I'm going to have messages that say, hey, I'm missing stuff. Well, here it is. Took it a while. Say, hey, the method view1 button pressed is and the protocol is not implemented. Yeah, that's why I put it in here, so that I would remember to implement it, hopefully, while we're using the protocol. Also makes it consistent. Any view controller that implements this protocol is going to have those methods in it that are going to be useful, hopefully. So let me go back to ViewController.h, just in case I need to add anything else. Oh yeah, you just separate them by commas. If you look at the video from earlier today, we did that. From today, we did, what did we do? The picker. The lottery number. we used a picker that used 2 protocols. So you just separate them by commas. If you look at that, it's from today. It's not posted yet, but it will be posted tomorrow. You'll see it. Yes, you can use more. So basically, we're telling the view controller to use the protocol. So we're going to add 2 new properties, one for each one of the views, because we need to make the view controller aware of the 2 views. So we're going to make them of data type view1, and we're going to make them view1, view1, view2, view2, so we can keep track of them. So here's our 2 properties. We're going to put them in. So we're going to synthesize them next. But we have them in here. 2 properties, one for view1, one for view2, so that we can set and get stuff on the view1 and view2. And the view controller knows about them. Alright. So let's see. The view controller class adopts the ViewDelegate protocol before setting up the 2 properties for the subviews. So we're going to make the following change to ViewController.m. Well, first we're going to add the line to synthesize view1 and view2. I always like to do that first, actually. And then we're going to implement the 2 methods that we put in the protocol. No mystery here. This is actually quite simple. It's in you got the ViewController.m. We're not going to use any private methods, so I'm going to get rid of this one up here. I'm going to get rid of the interface that's in here. We actually did use private methods earlier today, but I know already I'm not going to use any private methods. So I've synthesized view1 and view2. Now I'm going to need to add those 2 methods. So I still have this warning message. It's not an error, it's just a warning. It's telling me I haven't implemented anything yet. So I'm going to add the method to implement the protocol methods that's required by the implementation because we're using the protocol. So I want the desired functionality, I would hope, as well. So it's sending the delegate, the view delegate, it's sending it this stuff. So we're going to want to use it. And what am I going to use? Well, it's button1.pressed. Here, let me just put it in here, actually. I'm going to stick it, I'll stick it on the top here actually. Now, cut and paste here didn't work very well here. Our buttons aren't really doing very much. As we saw in the example that I ran at the beginning, it's just sending an NS log. And the NS log is saying, button 1 touched, button 2 touched. What we want to do, probably do something else with it. If we have multiple views, is it possibly, perhaps at this point, okay, so we made the views stack one on top of the other by setting the frame size to half the width of the view of the window of the frame. So we have the dimensions of the colors that we selected here, and we're going to see that come together with the view did load. But if we wanted to, as an example, we can have many different views. So going back to what I was saying earlier with that storyboard and the view controllers, this is one view controller that's controlling multiple views. Not controlling multiple view. I mean, it's okay to do it this way. This is another way of doing it versus having one view controller with one XIB file interface that's working with it. And following, I was talking about model view controller earlier today, and I was saying it's not a bad idea to have the view associated with a separate controller. But here we have subviews. So the concept here is we're taking one main controller and we're adding two subviews to it, and we're controlling both subviews by the same controller. Gives us a lot more flexibility. What if we don't want to use view 1? We just want to use view 2. We want view 2 to fill up the whole area. We can do that. It doesn't have to take up half the area. What if we want multiple views, program them programmatically, don't have to worry about the interface, and then just add them when we want them? Why would we want that? Well, maybe we have a game, and the game's going to show us different status depending upon what we're doing, and if we're failing, it's going to have like some guy going downhill or something, and it's going to, maybe the view is just showing a picture. Here we have views that have buttons on them. Maybe showing a picture, maybe a view is leading to another view. And we can kind of navigate without using a storyboard concept, but we're navigating with subviews, and we're loading subviews dynamically whenever we want to. We load, we unload, we do whatever we want with them, basically.
Without delegate, you can't do that. You need a delegate.
Well, here we're just setting this delegate here, this view delegate, we can do it without the protocol. We don't need a protocol for this. We're putting the protocol in here to make everything consistent so that they're all of the same type. We're making the ID, it's like taking a is-a relationship with them. We're making them consistent. We're putting all the same button functionality on them so that we can use them like this. Otherwise, you load the view. How do you know what's on the view? How do you know how you're going to get? Well, we're gonna load it in the view did load in a few minutes. We haven't loaded the views yet, actually. We're just telling the view. At this point, we've told the view did load that we've got these two methods that we're going to implement from the protocol. We're just implementing the method protocol. This method protocol has these two funny methods in it. View 1 button pressed and view 2 button pressed, and we're sending that from the click method that's going on here down on the bottom. We're sending it self delegate. We're sending it to the view 1 button pressed. So here we're using a delegate to kind of keep them all together, and the other one's going to send self delegate view 2 button pressed. One way, I guess we need it in this particular case, but this is just one way of doing it, is what I want to say. This is not the only way of putting subviews in. There's tons of different ways of doing it. This just happens to be one of the more interesting ways of doing it programmatically. So if you have it all saved, you can switch the views around, we'll do which one you want. They all abide by the same protocol. You know you have the same methods, and it'll work in the view controller as if, you know, and it knows how to speak with the view controller because it has the protocol methods implemented. We can add other stuff beyond the protocol methods, which we haven't done yet either, which I believe we're going to do in the part 2 of this, but we'll see what happens here. Alright, so I was in the ViewController.m. I added the two methods of the prototype. Now I need to change the view did load to load my views, I believe, but let me take a look here. Add the two lines to view did load method. We're going to say self.view1.delegate is equal to self. Self.view2.delegate is equal to self. Well, we're making them equal, so they're going to contain them. They're not going to be part of the subview, they're going to be part of self. So we're making the view delegate, we're making view 1 and view 2 part of the view controller. by adding these two, and you're going to put it right below. You want to keep the super view did though, because you're going to need to call super anyway, but I'm just going to put it right here. So now, essentially, just take this at this point as we're adding it to the view controller, to its identity. It's now part of self. So we're stacking up the hierarchy to include it. So when it loads, it's going to load it as itself. Add these two new lines to the view did receive memory warning. If we run out of memory, we're just going to send it to null. It's actually kind of optional, but it's not a bad practice, actually. Take the views away, otherwise your app's going to crash. You could put something underneath it. We haven't done very much in terms of making sure our app behaves properly once it crashes or once it goes away. Like, I think this is probably the first time we're adding anything to the did receive warning, which means if we have some problem going on, because we're loading multiple subviews, if we put a lot of stuff in there, we could optionally take something away. Here we're just going to take both of them away. What does that mean? It means we're not going to have crash, bang, extremely weird exception going on, so it's just going to unload it. We'll see a blank screen. So you put something on the blank screen that says, need internet access, or maybe, I don't know why I would have that problem. That would be another app. That would be another problem. But here it would be out of memory. There's too much data loaded in your app, because maybe the view's loading up data or something. Who knows what these views are doing? Whatever the view might happen to be doing. If it ends up with a memory warning error, so it's low on memory, there's an issue with memory, we're going to gracefully exit out. So add this entire method, init with nib name. When we load the name, load the nib, we're going to initialize it by allocating the memory for each one of the views. We're going to set the background color. This is the initialization for actually loading the views in the nib. So let me cut and paste this and put it in here, and I'll show you what this is doing. And then I'll go through the explanation for it. I'm going to put it right here, actually. Doesn't matter where you load it. Order does not matter. Good. Made it. So I'm going to look at it from here because this is formatted a little bit easier and there's no word wrapping going on. So what are we going to do? We're going to take the bundle. Self is going to be equal to super, call the super one first. It's pretty standard. We're going to set the rectangular frame for view 1 frame. And the view 1 frame is going to be set to these particular bounds. This is how we're going to get the height and the width that we're setting. We're setting them to equal bounds, actually, of the height of the size divided by 2. We could play around with the numbers, put one a little bit higher than the other. I mean, make one a little bit bigger if you wanted. But we're just taking the height of the screen dynamically, dividing it by 2, putting it in one top or the bottom. So we're going to load this one in the top part. This is view 1. So self.view1 is equal to view1 alloc, which means allocate the view 1. Initialize with the frame view 1 frame, and the view 1 frame is this view 1 frame here that has the size set to be half the size of the height. And the bounds of the width are bound to the size of the view. So it's 0, 0 with the bounds.size.width and the self view bounds.size.height divided by 2, because we need to fit 2 views in here. We could do a different theory on it, put them instead of horizontally, do them vertically or something. I don't know. Okay, so we're going to set the background color here. We're going to make this one a red color by using a self.view1.background color is equal to UI color, red color. We've done UI colors. Hopefully we are familiar at this point. And then we're going to add subview self view 1, add it as a subview. And then we're going to work with frame number 2. So frame number 1 was working with view 1. So CG rectangle, create the frame for view 2 frame. And that one's going to be equal to, well, the height divided by 2 with the bound set for the height. So we're going to take the lower end of the height. So the lower part of the starting position is going to be at the lower end instead of the higher end starting position. Because we have, instead of 0, 0, which we did up here, we're going to go 0 with the height divided by 2. So we're starting halfway down the page when we start loading this view as a subview. And then we're going to allocate it. And then we're going to set the background color here to blue. Why are we going to do that? Just so we can tell the views. If we don't set the background color, we're never going to be able to tell which view is which view. It looks like what? It looks like all the same page, doesn't it? So, which is what some people do, actually. So it just looks like all the same page. So what are these changes accomplished? First, we define the two delegate methods that we did. And we just log out the fact that the buttons were pressed. We're not really doing anything with it. Next, we're going to override the init with nib name bundle to create the two subviews, give the properties before adding them to the subview of the view controllers. And then last but not least, we set the view controller as the delegate for view 1 and view 2 in the view did load. Ah, tongue twister there. Run your app. The views will display in the proper colors, and the respectful buttons would hopefully touch. When you touch them, we're going to appear. They're not going to do anything, but they're going to appear on the bottom in the log as we saw before. Do the same thing for view 2, but make the NSLog read as follows. NSLog view 2. So what do we have here? Add in the NSLog statement. Why wasn't that put before? And the touch button method. Oh, we didn't do this yet. So we have the functionality, but we didn't put in the functionality for the button presses. So after our change to ViewController.m, we're done with that one. Leave it alone. Go into the view1 and view2.m. When the button gets pressed, put the log event in there. Otherwise, we're not going to know what button was pressed and when. So this one's button 2. I know. I'm going to change it to 2. Button in view 2 was pressed, and then now, if this is view 1. This is view 2. Okay, so then I go to view 1, and I'm going to stick in here the button. Otherwise, we can't tell what happens. This is 1, so we're good with this one. So now if we run it, it should work. So keep part 1 open, don't close it immediately. There's a second part to this. Make it a little bit, just some more stuff to it. I believe there's also a third part to this one, but I don't have it uploaded, but let me see. I can't remember at this point. Let's see part 2, see if it does everything I think it's supposed to do. Crash, bang, it didn't work. Yes, it did. So I'm pressing button 1, I'm pressing button 2. This is an interesting screen because I have the 4.0 screen. I didn't change the size of the screen. And I'm running it on a 3.5 colored emulator. So cut the 4-point in half. And it used the first half of the 4-point screen for the top piece. And it started at 50% 0 with the height divided by 2 for the lower, but the lower is smaller. So this tells me that I don't have a 4-point whatever. So if I wanted to really make them equal, which I don't have to, I could actually go into the ViewController window here, which is set on 4, Retina 4 full, change it to 3.5, rerun it. Now when it calculates dynamically half of the height, I'm going to get half the height, the true half of the height. Let's see what happens. Or am I going to have to change it? No, it should be set, the view type parameter should be set at 3.5. Now it looks more like 50-50 to me. So, which is the interesting phenomena that you get. So the question is, do you make your app for 3.5 or do you make it for 4? This is going to stretch on a 4 screen. Is it going to look that bad? Probably not. Yeah?
So it is dependent on the size of this 3.5. Otherwise, like, what is actually the problem?
Oh, the problem that I was running into is I was taking the position to add view 1 and view 2. This one's at 0, 0. This one's at 0, comma, this height divided by 2. But before I had my height set to the 4-inch full retina screen, which is going to give me a bigger screen.
But still we are dividing it.
Yes, but I'm running it on an emulator that's running 3.5. So let me go back and show you. If I put this to 4, the screen's bigger. If I divide this in half and start at this position, it's lower than if I divide this one in half. the height is two different measurements. So the shorter height is going to give me a 50-50 on the screen because I'm loading the second one at 0. At the height position is going to be X. The Y is going to be down here at half the screen. So it's going to put my view at half of the 4 instead of half of the 3.5, and I'm loading it in a 3.5 emulator, which is why it looks like that. If I loaded it in a 4-point emulator, it wouldn't have that problem. So that's what I was trying to say before. Do you build your app for the bigger, longer iPhone, the newer version of the iPhone, or do you build it for the shorter one? If you build it for the bigger one and they load it on the shorter one, it's going to look like that. If you build it for the shorter one and they load it on the bigger one, it just looks stretched a little bit at worst case scenario. Otherwise, you don't have to scroll down. It looks pretty good. What we'll do, in fact, this one doesn't. In fact, let me do it this way actually. Put it on 4. I should be able to scroll the screen down to the second part of the view. Let's see what happens. I didn't try that actually. I assumed that it stopped because what I was looking at was just the view that I was watching. So. No, I can't. Well, I didn't put any scrolls in on the view. I don't have any scroll behavior going on here. That would cause a bug, then that would be an irritating bug. And you go, how come that's happening? It's because the screen and programmatically it's set to a 4-point full screen instead of a 3.5. You got 0.5. The calculation is messing it up. And there's no, you could put a scroll. You'd have to add a scroll bar to the view, and then you could scroll down to the bottom of the view. But that's another component we're not looking at here. So. Everybody have a working part 1? If not, go ahead and open up part 2. I'm going to change the screen size actually to 3.5. And I'm just going to continue forward here. Oops. I don't have internet access. Is this the same problem we had last weekend? Reconnect. Let's see. It should come back. Oh, it did come back. So I'm going to this website here, actually. If you've lost your access, reconnect. And now I'm going over to iOS application development. If you did not get this part, click on example projects. Yours is not working. Pick up the solution for part 1. Now we're going to do part 2 of the tutorial, which is not too bad. It's actually, we'll finish this up, no problem. Part 2, and there's the part 2 solution. So let's see. Download. I think I have it downloaded, but let me just make sure. This is my subs. So let's take a look here at part number 2. Let me just make sure I finished this one here so I'm picking up where I'm supposed to be letting off. What do I got here? Subviews 1. That's the one I just had opened up. We added the button control to view button 1, view button 2, and then we put the output out there, and so we finished this one. That's very good. So if we don't finish it, we're going to pick up at the wrong spot. Okay, so let's take a look at part number 2, if I can find it in my mess of files here. Subviews 1. I'll just download it because I don't see it. Maybe I accidentally deleted it. Alright, let me go back to that website then. Sorry about that. Gives you time to catch up if you haven't finished that one yet. So example projects, and I'm going down here. I'm going to do subviews 2. Let's see. It's only 3 pages. It's not too bad. We'll definitely finish this tonight because I don't want to pick it up in two sittings. Okay, so in part number 2, we're going to take a look here. What are we going to add? So in part number 1, we created the app that has 2 single view controller that dynamically creates 2 subviews with a single button on each one of them. We just did it, so it's pretty familiar. We used a delegation through a protocol method to respond to the button touches. Did that one. But the view controller isn't responding to the delegate method, actually. Actually, it isn't. The source code for part 1 is available, so go ahead and download it if you haven't. So all view controllers have a view. So we're going to make some modern modifications here to make the view controller respond to the delegate methods. Because right now they're the delegate methods themselves, which are button 1 press, button 2 press, are just printing out an NS log. The view controller is not really responding to them. It's just the methods themselves are printing out the log. So we have to have some method controller inside of the controller to respond to the view's behaviors, or whatever the view buttons are doing. So the view controllers have a view. View controllers is one. Okay, so a view controller's view is the one that's declared by the ViewController.xib, which is empty right now. And so the view did load is a delegate method, and it's called by the ViewController's main window when that one is loaded. So regardless of whether or not the nib init with nib bundle was loaded or not, it's done. So in case the view did load is attempting to set self to the delegate property of each one of the views before the views have been instantiated, we need to put a little check in here. So what we're going to do is, since view 1 and view 2 are uninitialized, if we do try to load them and they're not initialized, we can't tell. So the code in the view controller is equivalent to saying view did load, super view did load, nil is equal to self, nil is equal to self. We're basically setting a nil value so that we can check for that and then load something if nothing is loaded in the view controller. So we're looking at, right now we're taking care of the XIB, ViewController.xib functionality. We're making some modifications to it so that if nothing's loaded, we can tell what's going on. So we haven't added any code yet. Don't look at this. This is just an example here of what it would look like. We're not putting this in there though. We're going to instead provide it with the information. So the property itself, this provides a good mental, this here is a good mental approximation of what happens since the uninitialized object are basically nil to begin with. So if we set it to nil, we can check to see if it's uninitialized, and if it's uninitialized, we can initialize it. So to fix the situation, we simply move the delegate settings from the view did load to the init with nib bundle. So we're going to move that out, stick it inside of the other methods that we added in there so that we can check for the set it to self instead of to nil. So we set it to something initially. So open up the ViewController.m and add the 2 lines to the end of the if self section of the init with nib name. So we're going to add these 2 lines in here. We actually did this part. This part was already in the code. So we fixed this part already. This is part that I put in order to make the buttons work. So now if you run the application, click on the buttons, you see the results here that are going to be shown with button in view 1 is pressed, button in view 2 is pressed. So we did the first part where we have one of the messages showing. We're going to put this in here so we register it so that both of the messages are showing. Where are these messages? One of the messages is coming from the button clicked event, the first one that we put in, from the button touch up inside method that we linked to each one of the views, view 1 and view 2. This other method is coming from the view controller. So what we didn't do is make the connection between the view controller and the separate views. The separate views right now are on an island of its own. Now we're making the view controller control the separate views, which is not bad behavior because then you can have the view controller actually work more efficiently. So let's see if I can do this. I'm going to cut and paste this here and open up the ViewController.m, add these 2 lines to the end of the if self selection in the init with nib name method. Let's see. Oops. Let me go back for 1 second here. Have the 2 of them correct. Very good. If self, which one am I loading it to? Change this around a little bit. I'm going to put it to the bottom. So we're putting it inside of the loading of the views inside of the nib. So I've got self view1.delegate is self. So this is the same thing that was in the view did load, but we're putting, once the view loads, after the view has loaded, it loads to two subviews. There's no connection. So we missed the connection, so we put this same thing that we're putting in the view did load, we're putting it in the two views as they're loading. So we put it on the bottom of the init with nib, which I believe is the correct spot, but I'm not quite sure what this is saying here. The if self section of the init with nib. Okay. Run the app now, click on the buttons and see the new results. So let's take a look. I'm going to easily see that we have it in the view did load right underneath it. What we're doing is we're loading it with each one of the nibs that we're loading. We're loading two of them in here. We're loading the view 1 and the view 2. And then I put it at the end. After it's been allocated, then it's going to set the view 1 view delegate to self, which is self. This is self, so it's the view controller. So let's see what happens when we run it. We can, no, actually, the init with nib is initializing it with view 1 and view 2, taking up the corresponding spaces at the rectangles that we've defined. When this view loads, it loads the nibs. So the view load method, although this is great to put it here, it doesn't actually, it doesn't load the, it doesn't make the view controlled by the view controller. It makes the view controller able to control the views. So we have a, think of it like we have a connection going this way, but we don't have a connection going this way. The connection going this way is we're telling the view controller about the two views, and we're making the two views part of the view controller, but the view controllers themselves, the views themselves, view 1 and view 2, aren't registering themselves with the view controller. So when the button is clicked, the behavior of the button click is only working on each one of the views. So now when we click it, it should be working for both of them, which it is actually. By setting, so here I'll do the before and the after and we'll see what's going on here. So if I press button 1 and button 2 now, I have two messages that are coming to the screen. One of them is button 1 touch, the other one is button in view 1 is pressed. Okay, so let me stop this for a second. I'm going to go back and I'm going to comment out those two lines that I put in and show you what's happening. Oops, I was here. Right. So I'm going to take and comment out these two lines. And I'm going to show you in the view 1, let's just look at one of them. We have the view 1 implementation where we have button touched. And in here I'm going to say let's see, now in the view, button in view 1 is pressed. So I'm in the view. That one's going to work because we told the delegate, we told view controller about the view or clicking it in the view, but the view doesn't go back to the view controller. If it sends it back to the view controller,
the view control doesn't have a controller, it just renders the view.
Yeah, it's not controlling the views. So now when I press it, I got now in view 1, button number 1 in view pressed, but I don't get the other message that shows up. The other message is coming from the view controller. This one's coming from the button that was pressed on the view. So what we did was I'm sorry?
What's the other message?
In the view controller, let's take a look. If we go back up to the view controller, and we look up here, we've got an NS log coming out. Let me take a look here. There's another message that's being printed. It's coming out here. We have one here that says view 1 button pressed and view 2 button pressed. So I'm going to put here now, or I'm just going to put here in view controller, but these buttons aren't working because although we've told the view controller about the views, and the view controller now can load the two views, the views don't know about the view controller. So when we load the nib, init with nib, we're loading the two view controllers. At the end, we're going to tell the two view controllers about the controller. And we're going to tell them to make it equal to self. So now we have both sets of methods that work. So the subview is now aware of the bigger view that's housing the subview, the delegate, which is acting as the delegate. So the delegate is the class that's responsible for the behavior. So technically, if this view controller is working correctly, we should be putting the functionality in here. We shouldn't be putting it in the view. Now we have two places in the code. It's a terrible mess to troubleshoot. Think about. In fact, if you think about how long it took you to figure out what was going on in this scenario, imagine trying to troubleshoot that in a problem. So here, what we should do is remove the comments out. Remove the NSLog out of the buttons and have the view controller control the view, which is what we're supposed to do. So now if we take those two lines out, set view1 delegate to self, which is view controller. Set view2 delegate to self, which is the view controller. Now the view controller, when we sent, and I'll show you the line of code in the button that sends it back. In the button, we have, in the button implementation, I'm clicking on view 2 here actually. On the button click, we're setting self.delegate view2 button press. This is a method that we're running. We're running this method view2 button pressed. We're running the method from self.delegate. The delegate's the view controller. So in the view controller, we're running this method. Well, what's the method that we're running? Well, this is the method. We're running this. Where'd it go? Oops, here it is. We're running this method, and this method's right here. But it won't run it unless we tell the view that, hey, we're that delegate. That's our delegate. So when we say equal to self, we're equal to delegate, which means it's known, it's self. It now turns into the delegate, when the delegate is the view controller. So now if we press the buttons, we get both. So we have the in view controller button 1 touched, now in view 2, button in view 1 is pressed. So one button is coming from the view. It works both ways. So we don't actually have to put it. If we don't put it in the self, watch this. Watch this. Oops. Let's go back down to here. Let's go back to ViewController.m, which I'm at. Go over here, and let's take in the view did load. Take these two guys out. Same two lines of code I put in the loading of the nibs, and we run it. See what the screen's going to look like. Is it running? It is running. That's good. It's a good sign so far. Hello? Oh, there we go. Now they both work. They don't have to. We don't have to actually. We don't have to have it in there at all. I can take it out. They're both working again. So it's unnecessary. In view controller, now in view. So it's unnecessary. Don't need it. Well, because we're loading them anyway. We're loading them in the nibs. What do we need it for?
If you don't load it in the nibs, then
If we had some activity on the view that was going the opposite direction to the view controllers, which we're not doing. The thing is, we're not demonstrating the right. If we put something out in the view controller and have the view controller go access one of those views, go the opposite direction, we're not communicating that direction. We're going from the views into the view controllers, which is why we're not noticing any problem here. So technically for this application, it's really not even needed. I'm going to leave it in just in case we go the opposite direction, which I don't think we're going to do, but we can definitely kind of see how it works. The subviews are communicating with the big view is communicating with the subviews. But here we don't have the big view communicating with the subviews at all. It's just loading the subviews. It's loading the subviews up here, so it doesn't really need to. It's just making an instance of each one of the views, loading into those rectangular regions as defined.
So what was the issue with us not showing up the button list last time?
the reason why we weren't getting 2 is because we weren't telling the subviews anything about the main view. We're telling the main view, we're telling the view controllers about the subviews, we're just not telling the subviews about the view controller. And what I mean by telling them about it is making them equal to self. So if the view 1 delegate is equal to the self, then it's running by the same delegate, same controller. View 2 is equal to self, which means view controller will respond to things that the view asks for it to do. The thing that the view is asking for it to do is in the button presses, and it's saying, run this method. The view wants to run this method. It can't run the method. Well, no error message or anything going on, but it just doesn't communicate. It doesn't communicate because it's running under a different delegate. You take the delegate, make it equal to self, then you have it all working on the same, they're all communicating together. The reason why we don't have to worry about the opposite direction is because we're not asking, the view controller isn't asking the views anything, isn't trying to run anything from the views. If it does, then we're going to have to set them to equal. So in the view did load, we should set the view controller. We don't really need it though because we're not using it. It's not part of this application.
So it's equal to delegate.
We're setting the delegates to be the same. If we set the delegates to be the same, then we end up with the same communication going on. We're all part of the same family. We're all controlled by the same component, which is the view controller. It's an interesting way of designing it. So, I don't believe there's too much left to this tutorial, but let's just take a look here. There's a lot of explanation here. The first message from the button is from the action method in each one of the views. We saw that part. The second is from the view controller's implementation of the delegate method. Saw that part because we asked it to run that method. Alternatively, we could move all of the code inside of the, which we actually figured out by trial and error here, inside of the init with nib bundle to the view did load and do away with overriding the init with nib if we wanted to. Actually, it's explaining the opposite direction is what we were going. We can take it out of the view did load, put it all into the init with nib name and give it the nib names. Or we can take all the init with nibs and stick it inside the view did load, because what are we doing? We're just loading the view, and on the view did load we're loading the 2 subviews inside of it. So we can move it all to the view did load, which is I believe this next step is going to do. So the point is that we should always ensure that the objects are properly allocated and initialized before attempting to set or get properties from those objects. So perhaps the best way is to ensure that the objects are created before using this lazy initialization. Lazy initialization is moving it to the view did load. So in this approach, we're going to override the setters and getters of the properties of the alloc and init, and then that might already exist. So here in the new ViewController.m that dispenses gets rid of the init with nib, we don't necessarily need to do this one. It's not going to give us anything different. It's just showing us a different way of doing it. Replacing ViewController.m with this code here. What's this one going to do? Well, it defines the 2 views, view 1 and view 2, and then the buttons, and then in the view did load, we're going to load them up. So we're going to take and make them equal, and so then our finished app is more properly organized. So we're taking, returning the views, creating the 2 views with the view 1 and the view 2 with the same coordinates as before, same colors as before. So if you took this code, replaced it, put it into the ViewController.m, it would accomplish the same task. It's just organized differently. So we're taking essentially we're taking the 2 lines out of the init with nib. We're moving the init with nib code out. And we're putting it in the view did load method, so we're going to run it from here. We don't need them in both places. The way we have it now, we could take it out, not put it in here. So, and we got rid of the init with nib. Instead of the init with nib, we have these 2 method implementations that creates view 1 and view 2. So, an application using this? Subview complex? Well, an application that general public might be familiar with using subviews. Anything that having to do with setting properties for an app, anything having to do with usually adding data, setting properties, sorting properties. You can add views to control. Huh? Pop-up windows and stuff. Yeah, it's a classic subview right there. Pop-up windows, dialog windows, anything that's inside of the parent. And so anything the view controller is loading up after the view controller loads up is a subview. This is just happens to be putting it into frames and loading it inside of the parent controller window, the controlled window. You missed that lecture too? Yes, we can. So the question was asked. Okay, we're done with this one unless anyone has any questions about this one. No. The question was asked about putting views inside of views, and I had a lecture. Actually, I had a tutorial. You missed a lot of tutorials. There's a tutorial that we did several weeks ago that did that. Let me just show you real quick what we're doing here. Single view, because you may not be the only one actually. I'm going to call this one subviews. It was called Introspect, actually. We took and created, let me show you the alternative to this, because this might be interesting. So this tutorial was called Introspect if you're looking for it, and what we did with this one is we took this window here, and we looked in here and we said, look, we got a view. And then we came out here and we said, oh, let's just add another view. What view do we want to do? Table view, regular view, UI view, image view, text view. We added, what did we put in here? We added image view. I can't remember what we put in here. We put subviews inside of views, text view, image view. Hold on one second. Let me take this out for a second. We did the objects. We did.
This is through the XIB, right?
I'm sorry?
This is through XIB.
Using the XIB, we nested the views.
But what we did is through the code. We created the views.
It's the same thing, whether we create it through the code, if we can go view, view 1, view 2, we can create this. This is the view we're talking about. This is the view that we've been loading in here. This has a default view. We loaded 2 subviews inside of this view programmatically. We can drag and drop all sorts of views in here. Here's a view. This is the one I was looking for actually. Here's a view inside of a view. And then we can take another load. Put that view inside of that view. And then we can take another one. And this is what we did actually in the Introspect. And then we took the views, and here we see, in here we have a view inside of a view inside of a view. What we did was we had view 1, view 2, we did it programmatically, added them to the view. We can go like this, and we can hide and show different views by dragging and clicking and controlling it in here. So this is view 1. We have view 2, view 3, view 4. And in the in the example that we looked at, we went through, created an array of the components that were inside of here, because then we took this view here as an example, and let's just go back to label. Put a label in this view, and then let's switch to this view. Put a label inside of this view, and then let's switch to this view. Put a label inside of that view, and then you can kind of go through and collect the views up, see what views are out there, see what labels are out there, take all the labels that are out on a view, per view, change the colors of them, I don't know, do something to it. So we were hiding and showing and changing colors of different components that were inside of the views. The purpose of that one was to show you the nesting of the components and how you can get at each one of the different objects, but also to demonstrate the concept of the views. In fact, even when you're doing this, let's just start deleting. So I'll just start deleting some of this stuff out of here. Even if you do this, web view, these are all views. The web view is now a subview of the view. So I have a web view that's going to show a web page. It's a subview of my main view. So when I'm doing this, I can drag and drop the view, drag and drop the subview, maybe put an image view on here too. Take the image view, stick it on top of the, put it inside, well actually this is on the same level, I can stick it inside of the web view, this is just in the view. So I have the image view that's inside of the view and the web view that's inside of the view. I can go like this actually. It's not going to like the web view holding an image view actually, because the image view is not designed to go inside of a web view. or vice versa. So it's not going to nest, but that's some pretty heavy nesting. You got two subviews in here. So the idea is we're taking programmatically, we're using a way of doing it through one controller. This is also one controller, but as I was saying earlier, if you're going to do this, you might as well do a storyboard. Because then you can take all of the views and they have separate controllers. So, I don't know, I guess it's worthy a few minutes here. I'll reiterate the point, just because I know you guys, some of you guys aren't in the class I had earlier today, so tune me out if you already heard this from me today. But with this going on, putting multiple views in here, it's all controlled by one controller because we're sticking it inside of the XIB that's controlled by this view controller. So we know it's controlled by the view controller when we click on the editor button and it brings up the view controller. The alternative and better way of doing it is to use the storyboard but actually create multiple controllers for it. So in this scenario, actually what did I do earlier? I think I did a tabbed view, I think. Let me demonstrate it with a tabbed application and then I'll show you the storyboard. This is multiple views. Whoops. In here, we got the proper template that's being created for us. We have an XIB here. That's the second view. We have XIB. Oh, I did it without. Let's see. We have the first controller. We have the second XIB, and then we have a first view controller .h, a first view controller .m, along with a first view controller .xib. I didn't do a storyboard option, I did a separate one. And we have a second view controller .xib with a second, this is actually different, second view controller .m and a second view controller .h that work together. So each XIB's got its separate view controller that's associated with it, which is let me build this again actually in a different way to demonstrate something else to you. I wanted to do it as a storyboard so I can see it all out there. That doesn't, it's the same concept, but it doesn't show you everything. So if you click on the storyboard, you'll see everything all together on one storyboard instead of having separate XIBs. The concept is the same, but sometimes it's easier to see the abstraction when it's all put together. So I'm going to call this a tabbed story. It doesn't really matter what I call it. I'm going to throw it away when I'm done with it. But you can see from the storyboard the abstraction a little bit clearer, especially if you zoom in on it, or zoom out a little bit here. See, I have the tab bar controller with view 1, view 2, and then I have view 1, first view controller.h, first view controller.m that's controlling this first view controller. So I brings it up here, and this controller is controlling this controller. Second, you can see it's changing. This one's the first one, this is the second one. If I put a third one in, I'd have a third one. So it usually comes in sets, view controller with XIB that's associated with it. What we're talking about in the example today with the subviews is instead of creating another view that's outside, that's controlled by a different controller, we're taking one controller and we're having it control different views. So we have put all the views inside of one controller. Why do I want to do that? I don't know. May or may not necessarily have a need for it. Depends on what you're trying to do in your application. But in theory, if you're following model view controller correctly, you have a view, you have a controller, and then you have the delegate, which is the brains of the operation or the model that's holding the connection between the views and the controller, as we saw in this example actually, which is a really good underlying kind of, if you dwell on it a little bit, marinate it a little bit in your brain and kind of think about it, it's a really good model view controller application, the subviews, because it has all components. Huh? That's what we were doing. We were loading two subviews into the same controller, being used by the same controller inside of the same view. So we had a main view, we had a subview, and the main view was the main XIB file controlled by the main view controller. And then inside we had the two views. And the problem was and this is a really good summary of this. The problem was we had to make the view controller aware of the two views, and the two views aware of the of the view controller. Because when we put something out here and we connect it, we're connecting it to a controller. If we have multiple views going to one controller, it can get kind of hairy if they're outside views. If they're subviews, then they belong together. Because you can still, at this point here, you can still come over here and drag another view if you wanted to. Go out here, this is not such a good idea, but you can put another view inside. Actually, this is not going to allow me to do it. I'm going to allow me to add a view controller because I'm on the objects here. If I put a new view controller in here, I've got it and he's detached. I should really create another set of classes. So what you can do actually is the opposite of that. Just come up here and go New, File, and then create an Objective-C class. And then go Next. And instead of UI view, you're really creating a new UI view controller. And then include the XIB file. And this one's going to be called Third. This is the part that was a repeat from earlier today. Third view controller. And then say OK. Finish. Now I have third view controller in here, so I have another XIB file, but is it part of the storyboard? No, it's a separate XIB file. So I can do it inside of the storyboard with or without an XIB file. I can do it inside of the storyboard, outside. I just did this outside of the storyboard, by the way. But I can see the concept here now. I have a view controller that's being controlled by the separate view. Inside of the storyboard, I can connect it up. If I can connect it up, then I can do here is just create another view controller class. Or better yet, just have this one part of this one. So if I can come over here, click on the view, and I change who's controlling it up here and go here. I want the third view controller to control it. So up here at the top it says custom class, third view controller. If I click on here, he's the first view controller. He's the second view controller. I just made this class control this guy here. And it's the third view controller, so now I come here and I can connect this way and I can establish the relationship. Now I have 3 buttons down here instead of 2. And now he's controlling first, second, and I can put a label out here and call this guy third if I wanted to. Label. Oops. I have to make him bigger, otherwise it won't go on. There we go. And then this guy's going to be third. So when I run this lovely application, just people have never seen this work before. And I believe there's probably some people in here who have never seen this before. Let's take a look. This is the type. This is called a tabbed application because we have little tabs on the bottom and we're going from one to the other. Yes? Oh, let me do that. Actually, I'll add a 4th one as soon as this loads up, so I don't have to load it again. For those of you who have never seen this before, here's the first view controller, here's the second view controller, and here's the one I added, the third. And let me put a 4th one on, a little bit slower so you can see what I'm doing here. I didn't know anyone was paying attention at this point. I'm sorry. Alright, so at this point people are just tuning me out. Alright, so well, let me do it this way. I'll do it in piecemeal because I'm going to take a view controller. This is what these guys are view controller components. So I'm just going to put one on here. I'll just do it this way. I'm going to add a label. I don't really have to label him, but at this point I'm just going to say he's my next one. And then I can create a class, let's say. New file. I'm going to call him 4th. So, because I already have a 3rd. So I'm going to go here, Objective-C class, next. He's a 4th view controller. I don't need an XIB because I just put one out there. I don't want to keep it. I added the view controller to the storyboard this time. So I can get rid of that old XIB. Or I can use it for something else if I wanted to. Next. It's not controlled by anything. Next. So now I have the class out here, but I have to tell the class what it's controlling. The view controller, what view it's controlling. So I'm going to go back to the storyboard. I'm going to click on the view that I'm interested in. I'm going to come up, I'm going to hit the third little icon over it says Identity Inspector. change the identity of the view controller to be controlled by this fourth view controller now. So I'm going to click over here and change him to the fourth, second, third. Whoops, he's the third. Let's see. Where's my fourth? Did I call it fourth? I called it fourth. Hasn't been updated yet. Hold on, let me update it now. Sometimes it doesn't show immediately. It should show. Let's just type in fourth. There we go, we got him in there. He didn't want to come up initially, but he's in there now. So you can see over here, hello, this way, it says fourth view controller. So I click on here, I have first, second, third, fourth. And if you're curious what you're doing in here is that he's now on an island of its own, not connected to the storyboard. So one of the things, I think I did this probably in like lecture 2 or 3, the beginning part, and you may have missed it because you joined the class late, but you click on the tab bar controller, press down the control button and drag them over here. You're pushing the tab bar, let go. You're pushing it, but we're establishing the relationship, and the relationship is that it's going to a view controller. We can actually push between the views, which is actually kind of interesting. So let me just do this one here. I connected it for you. So now I have a button on the bottom because the tab bar controller is pushing to the view. If I come over here and put a button, let's put a button. Round rectangular button. I'll put it on the fourth view. That oops, I have to make this a little bit bigger. It's one of the problems. It won't load it on if the window's too small. See now it loads it on before it rejected it. Kind of tacky. So, so let's push him to a view. Let's put a view out here. Watch this. View controller. Let's just put a view controller out here. Oops, let's stick them out here. Now the screen's too big, so we're going to overlap them. Let's go minus. This one here, I'm going to put a little label on it so I know which one it is. Label. You're not going to be part of the navigation. I'm going to get myself stuck. Whoops. I'm going to get myself stuck out of the navigation with this, but it's just for illustrative purposes. This guy is, I'm going to put here lost on him because he's not controlled by anything. He's not even belongs in here, so I'm going to put here lost guy. He's a lost, lonely guy out here in the world of his own. This button is going to push to him, so I can control drag it over to the view and push it, or I can modal it. I think I want to modal it actually. So now I got a connection. Let me make this smaller so I can see. What does it mean? It means he's going to come up in the same location. I'm going to push. I'm not pushing it, I'm modeling, so this guy's going to show up inside of this guy's space instead of loading him on top of the stack. He's just going to change his memory to be this guy. But he's not a part of this system here, but he's going to show up. At least I hope he's going to show up. Let's see what happens when I run this program. But now I got this guy, it's not controlled by anything. He's just a lonely view out there. Needs a view controller. I can actually assign him another view controller. So the rules can allow me to take multiple views and have multiple controllers assigned to it. So which one is he on? He's on the fourth, I think, right? First, second, third, fourth. Here's the button. There's the lost guy. Look happened though. Now we're really lost. I can't get back. Because you know why? He's not part of the system. We're pretty much lost at this point. Well, I can escape. Can I escape? No, I can't even get out of here. Let's just exit. I could easily fix that problem by putting a back button on him. So let's go here. Button. He's going to go back. Make this a little bit bigger. So people get themselves in some interesting situations when they start adding views. Let's see, we'll go back here. Now that I'm just playing around here, I got a few second minutes while you guys entertain me here. Back. Get me back. Get me back. Just going to push back to Who called me? You called me. So I'm gonna get you back to here. Let's see what happens when we push him back. Oops. Let's just go this way. We'll modal you back. That way we can get back into where we're supposed to be. Let's see what happens, actually. I believe it should work, actually. But we'll see. Because this guy's controlled by the button bar controller, so his button bar will show back up. This guy doesn't have a controller. He's pretty useless, actually, in this app. But people fill it up with stuff. They make it work. So it's the fourth one, right? I'm lost. Get me back. I'm lost. Get me back. I can't get back. It didn't work. Actually, we can do this. You know, I can fix this, actually. I can get you back. Get you back. Let's see. Get rid of you here. Your action is going to be triggered. So we're going to go back to you. I'm going to make them go back to the tab bar controller, who's going to load up the first view. So get me back here. I think I have to make this bigger. Let's get rid of some real estate here. There we go. I can do it this way. This one here is going to come back to here. Push it or modal it. Let's see what happens here. I think we're going to back to the main controller now. This one actually will work, I think. Let's see what happens. But that's kind of a bad design because he needs a controller. Or he needs to be part of this grouping. Or make another grouping and make that subgrouping part of this grouping. And then add a controller. He doesn't have a controller right now. So let's see what happens. Get me back. Ha! We're back. Because we got back into the main tab controller. So we got back. So anyway, that's just playing around. That's all the playing around I want to do. I think we're done for today. Unless you guys have other questions or something. So next week we're going to take the, and we're going to have another part. We're not done with the Friends yet. Friends is going to send emails next week. And then I have, pushing ahead, I've got some other stuff, but I can't remember what's on the calendar. So I'll populate the bhacker.com website before then. So we'll have some new tutorials to do. Otherwise, we're all done for today. Save your apps from today, because I believe there's another part to the scroll view. But I'm not quite sure. Your subviews, I'm sorry. Save your subview, because I think there might be another part to it, just in case. Okay, see you next week. Oh, for those people who are interested, Windows 8 app development is happening this Wednesday at 6 o'clock, 6 to 10 in the auditorium. A guy from Microsoft's coming down who's giving away free versions of Windows 8, but I'm not quite sure what it is. Windows 8. Matt Harrington. It's on the meetup group. If you're on that, you can get on that and get the notifications for it. But it is sponsored by Microsoft. They're going to buy us pizza, I think, and soda. I don't know. They're going to give us I don't know. They say they're supposed to. They should give us something, right? They should give us phones or something. But it's free, and it'll give you some exposure to Windows 8 app development if you have an interest in that. It's a Wednesday, this Wednesday, 2 days from now, 6 to 10 in the auditorium over here. Unless it's a small group, we'll move it to a classroom, but I'm pretty sure it's going to be in the auditorium. Huh? If you have a MacBook, you can come anyway, because he has a virtual machine software. I don't know what he thinks he's VBox or what he's going to use, but I'm bringing I have Windows 8 actually on here already, but if you come with a MacBook, he says he's going to be able to get you working. And if you have Windows 7, you can also get up to working on that. You don't have to have a Windows 8 machine. He has images, pre-built images that have everything installed in them. You just load the image up. What software they're using? You know what? Microsoft makes virtual machine, doesn't it? Microsoft's got virtual PC. Maybe it's virtual PC he's got. I don't know. Just bring your computer with you. I think any version of Mac, any version of Windows. I have no idea. I'm not the one doing it. I have no idea what he's going to do. I'll be there, but I'm not going to. Well, I'll be helping him, but yeah. It's not done it. It's a true Windows 8 app development is using Visual Studio with C# or JavaScript and HTML. or third-party tools. I believe he's going to show us a couple third-party tools. There's also a contest. Let me shut this video off. There's also a contest that